My name is Bryson, and I've never really fit into any box people tried to put me in. On the surface, I looked like every other senior at my high school, football team, decent grades, quiet enough not to cause trouble. But underneath that, I was carrying something I couldn't say out loud. Not to my friends, and definitely not to my dad. My dad, well, he's not the kind of guy you open up to about your feelings. He's ex-military. Everything in his life is structured, clean, and under control. Emotions? Those don't belong at the dinner table. And love? That better be with a nice girl who smiles politely and goes to church on Sundays. At least, that's what he always made clear. So I learned to live a double life. One for the world, and one for myself. And I got pretty good at it, until the day Kellan walked into my English class. He was the new kid. Transferred from somewhere up north, they said. He wore dark hoodies even when it was warm, kept his headphones in most of the time, and never sat with anyone at lunch. There was something about him, quiet, maybe even guarded, but it pulled me in. Not just his looks, though yeah, he was good-looking. It was his energy, the way he seemed completely disconnected from the whole fake popularity thing. He didn't try to impress anyone, and somehow that impressed me the most. We didn't speak until the school paired us for an art project. I almost asked the teacher to switch partners. I was terrified he might see through me. But when we sat down across from each other, he smiled. Not wide, just a small curve of his lips. And then he said, "You don't strike me as the artistic type." That made me laugh. Nobody ever dared to talk to me like that. Over the next few weeks, we worked on that project together. Mostly at school, sometimes after. He'd sketch while I painted. We'd talk about random stuff, music, books, how fake most people were. And even though we barely touched, even though we never said anything more than we should, I felt it. That strange pull in my chest when he looked up at me. That urge to say something real when we were alone. That ache in my stomach when he smiled, like I was seeing sunlight for the first time. I'd spent my whole life thinking I was just confused. That maybe it was a phase, a weird thought that I could bury deep and forget. But with Kellan, everything felt honest, unfiltered. And it terrified me. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't a crush. It wasn't a phase. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just curious. I was falling. Something about being around Kellan made the world feel quieter, safer. Like for a few hours, I didn't have to pretend to be someone I wasn't. We started texting after school, just casually at first, memes, homework questions, random thoughts about teachers we hated. But over time, our conversations grew deeper. He asked me questions no one else had ever thought to ask, and I found myself telling him things I hadn't even admitted to myself. We began walking home together. Not every day, just the ones when I could come up with a reason to avoid my usual ride. We'd take the long way through the back streets or cut through the woods near the old train tracks. It became our thing, our version of privacy in a town that had eyes everywhere. One Friday afternoon, we ended up at the old park near the edge of town. It was nearly empty, just the wind in the trees and the rusted swings creaking in the distance. We sat on a bench near the pond, talking about everything and nothing. Kellan was quiet that day, nervous.
So was I.
There was this long silence, comfortable but electric, and when I looked at him, he was already looking at me. "I've never done this before," he said. "Me neither," I whispered. And then it happened. Our first kiss. It wasn't perfect. It was shaky and unsure, but it was real. And in that moment, nothing else existed. Not my dad. Not the lies. Just the feeling of finally being seen. After that day, everything changed. We kept it secret, of course. There was no other option. I started telling my dad I was staying late for football meetings or study groups. The lies came easier than I thought they would. And maybe that's what scared me most. how natural it felt to hide this part of me. Kellan never pushed. He understood the stakes, or at least I thought he did. He never asked why I couldn't tell my family or why I flinched when someone looked at us too long in public. He just accepted it. But sometimes I'd catch a flicker in his eyes, a hesitation, like he was holding something back too. One night, we were lying in the grass, looking at the stars. I asked him, half joking, "What do you think this is?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I think it's whatever we need it to be." At the time, I thought that was beautiful. Now, I wonder if it was his way of not giving me an answer at all. I spent so much time protecting our secret, building walls to keep the world out, that I didn't notice what was happening inside. I thought we were hiding from the world. I didn't know he was hiding from me too. It was supposed to be the one weekend I didn't have to be afraid. My dad was heading out of town for a work retreat. 2 full days of peace. No tension, no carefully crafted lies. Just me and Kellan. I told him he could come over, finally, without having to sneak around or rush out the back door. We both laughed at how it felt like we were in some kind of indie movie. He showed up late Friday evening with a backpack full of snacks, a sketch pad, and that half smile I'd grown addicted to. We stayed up for hours, talking, watching old horror films on mute, drawing random things on sticky notes. For the first time in weeks, I let my guard down completely. I even let him fall asleep next to me, our fingers barely touching, hearts beating slow and steady like they were finally at rest. When I woke up the next morning, the light was already pouring through the blinds. Kellan was still asleep, his breathing soft beside me. For a moment, everything felt right, until I heard my bedroom door creak open. I turned over, and there he was, my dad, standing in the doorway. His face was blank. Not angry, not yelling, just still. And that was worse. Kellan sat up fast, wide-eyed. He tried to speak, but my dad held up a hand and said, "Don't. Just get dressed." I was frozen. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I might throw up. But what came next wasn't shouting. It wasn't rage. It was worse. "I know who he is, Bryson," my dad said quietly, still staring at Kellan. "He's not who you think." Kellan looked down, already avoiding eye contact. That's when the words came. "He's been seeing someone else. In his old town. A guy. This." He gestured to the two of us. "You were never the only one." I couldn't breathe. "No," I said, barely able to form the word. "That's not true. He wouldn't." "I'm sorry," Kellan whispered. He didn't defend himself. He didn't deny it. He didn't even look surprised. He just stood up, grabbed his bag, and walked out. Just like that. He didn't fight for me. He didn't try to explain. He just left me there, broken, humiliated, and exposed in front of the one person I had feared would see me for who I really was. But the betrayal wasn't in being caught. That wasn't what shattered me. It was realizing that the one person I trusted with the most fragile part of myself never really saw me at all. I was just part of his story, a stop along the way. And as I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to stop the shaking, one truth hit me harder than anything else. I thought the worst thing would be being caught. But the worst thing was being used, and I didn't move for a long time after Kellan left. I just sat there, staring at the floor, trying to piece together what had just happened. My throat was raw, my eyes stung, and every part of me felt exposed. I was waiting for the yelling, the disappointment, the shame I always imagined would follow if this moment ever came. But none of that came. Instead, I heard my dad's footsteps. Slow, careful, and then he sat down beside me. Neither of us said anything at first, just silence. Then, softly, he said, "I may not understand it, but I saw the way you looked at him. That was real." I couldn't believe it. I turned toward him, expecting to see judgment. But all I saw was something else, something heavier. Sadness, maybe. Regret. I spent your whole life trying to make you tough, he said, his voice low and steady. Wanted to prepare you for the world. Make sure no one ever broke you. He looked down at his hands. But I never thought I might be the one making you feel like you couldn't be yourself. That hit harder than any lecture ever could. I was scared, he admitted. Not of who you are, just of the world. How cruel it can be. I thought if I kept you in line, I could protect you. But I see now, what I was doing was locking you up. A lump formed in my throat, and I barely got the words out. So, you're not mad? He shook his head slowly. I'm mad he lied to you. I'm mad someone hurt my son.
But you? No.
I'm not mad at you. I broke down then. Not from shame, not from fear, but from the weight lifting off my chest. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to hide. Not from him. We didn't solve everything that night. There were still hard conversations ahead. But we started something new, something honest. In the days that followed, my dad kept his word. He didn't ignore what happened, but he didn't shame me either. He asked questions, not always the right ones, but I could tell he was trying. And that mattered more than anything. I never saw Kellan again. He transferred out a few weeks later. I thought I'd be angry forever. But now, I feel grateful. Because his betrayal led me to something I never expected. Truth. Real, unfiltered, painful, but healing truth. I lost someone who pretended to care. But I gained something even stronger. That night destroyed me. But it also rebuilt something stronger between me and the one person I thought would never accept me.